Hello, everybody. It's Mark Houston, Director of Programming for Home Slice Audio.
And Andy Young, Director of...
You want to wrap that? You want to define
come on.
that?
I don't understand why you're laughing about this.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thought you'd finish it. We're going to be talking with probably one of your favorite college professors, Dr. Sandy Schaefer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he recruited. So I remember putting in my application. I was going to go to school for graphic design and just listed on my application that I had interest in, or I was a guitar player. I'd been playing guitar for about 10 years or something at that point, just casually. And so he invited me to audition for a music scholarship and went and did that and just kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going.
You got a music scholarship?
Yeah.
Look at you.
Right?
Wow.
I don't know. You're laughing again.
I know. That was rude. The second one was just rude. I shouldn't have laughed.
It's hurtful.
Exactly.
It's okay.
But he was pretty instrumental in a lot of musicians around here and kind of...
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, a lot of the bands up here in the Black Hills, there's almost not a person that's not in one of these bands that doesn't have some connection back to that music department. I mean, there's 3 to 4 people just here at Home Slice that went through the music program up there. And then people over at the Loud American doing production. I mean, there's just, his fingerprints are kind of all over the music scene up here, and he probably doesn't even know it.
Well, Dr. Sandy Schaefer, it's very nice to meet you, and welcome to my first concert.
Man, how are you?
Good. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, hey, man, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
As you know, I can fill up airtime.
Perfect. This is Mark Houston. He's kind of doing this with us. So,
hello,
Hi, Mark,
Dr. Schaefer. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So you're
go ahead and refer to me as Sandy.
I will. Thank you very much.
I do have the kids in the high school call me Dr. S. So I still keep that.
Awesome.
That's so you just outside of Portland is where you're at then?
We're 2 hours
okay.
outside of Portland.
Okay.
It's called the Central Oregon Coast.
Central Oregon. How close are you to a Voodoo Donut? Because that's all I really care about in Portland.
No, man. 2 hours.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's about 2 hours to Eugene also. And a little more than that.
Okay.
But no, we're about 4th Street sitting from the ocean in a town called Lincoln City.
I was up by Haystack a couple summers ago before the pandemic and everything.
Yeah.
And you're just like south of there a ways, aren't you?
30 minutes.
Really? Oh wow. God, I should have hit you up.
Yeah. Haystack. Well, wait a minute. It depends which one. There are a couple of haystacks. Were you probably in Pacific City? Or maybe you were north?
Cannon Beach, I think.
Cannon Beach?
Yep.
A little further north.
Further.
Yeah, Cannon Beach, that's kind of the uppity resort.
Yeah, I got that vibe for sure.
Did you get that vibe?
I did.
We're a real town, you know.
Okay.
which is really funny. One of my friends pointed out, he liked Lincoln City because it was a real town, because there are other towns that are just conclaves of retired folks, gathered at the beach. There's a little one north of us called Nesco, and it's a golf course, and a restaurant and a bar and cool little houses. So here we have businesses and all of that, but the industries are tourism and retirement.
Sure,
for sure. Yeah, you can tell if they're
Well, I know. I'm sure, Sandy, that Andy kind of explained to you how the point of this whole podcast. We've been talking with people. Hopefully, we want to just cover every aspect of music, from the lead singers to the professors like yourself. It's just so interesting to find out where that moment for you clicked, and this is where you knew you wanted it to be. So I'd like to start kind of where you and Andy met in college there in Chadron, and I really want you to be honest about what kind of student he was, Sandy. Okay.
Oh. No, man.
You don't have to answer that.
Right. Well, you know where it is. It's Chadron State College, and that was the last 20 years of my teaching career, and Andy was like number one. There's always a handful of people who could kind of play, so we had a performing band, and we played maybe once or twice a month, called the Birds, because you needed funny names then. The vocal jazz group had a funny name, and when I got hired, they said, "Well, what are you going to call it? What are you going to call the combo?" So I thought, "Oh, it's the Eagles is their mascot." So I said, "Hey, the Birds." Charlie Parker, of course, being the number one bird in all our jazz musicians' life. So yeah, Andy was great, man. He played absolutely. You played in everything, because the people who had skills, they got to do all sorts of stuff. So they got to be really abused, like free gigs all over the place. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I never envisioned like performing in a vocal jazz band before, but I went and did like the vocal jazz tour with you guys. And that was super fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Vocal jazz, man. I fell in love with vocal jazz back when I joined the Columbia Record Club. I'm on a tangent, right? One of those records. And that's like, because of Dobie Gillis, I think. Dobie Gillis was a TV show back then, and they had a beatnik character named Maynard G. Krebs who loved jazz, and so they regularly dropped words like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk and all of those things. So when I got in the Columbia Record Club, bingo, I got those things, man. Got Charlie Mingus, and one was the Playboy Jazz Bowl winners that had a Lambert Henderson Ross doing Cloudburst, and I just fell in love with that vocal jazz after that. So how cool! Schaeffer actually has a really great vocal jazz thing going on, at least for any schools in the High Plains.
Well, and it was really cool, like the vocal jazz thing too. It's like they had like contemporary arrangers and like people composing for that genre too, as opposed to like there wasn't as many like big band new arrangers necessarily, but there was constantly. It just seemed like there was more contemporary arrangements going on for that genre of jazz.
Oh yeah, especially that's a whole music business discussion. This arranger named Kerry Marsh did amazing.
Yeah,
charts.
I think we met him at the thing down in Greeley, actually.
Oh, right,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, but because it's a little niche market, he's been doing all these arrangements and just selling them. People buying from him, but he not have copyright authorization.
Oh no,
license. So, but because they're so popular and famous, Hal Leonard, I think, went to him. Either that or Alfred, one of those guys went to him, and made him a deal to get him right with the music business world. So yeah, those things are great, man. And every year there was some personality to come to those vocal jazz things. And I actually played in the Girls Glee Club when I was in college, which was kind of like a vocal jazz thing. And like the arranger who was arranging back then, and that was the 60s, right? And his name escapes me. It's totally gone. But he was like the new guy, and all his arrangements were like absolutely so hip for 1967, and 68. So that guy was still around, and he had a 4-man vocal group, a bunch of college professors together, and one voice actor from Hollywood who does, he does all the cartoon voices,
Oh, yeah.
He's Simpson's singing voice. So watch those guys on stage performing, man. And one of them had a horrible cold. And I just remember them they switched parts around on the spot. And like when you're just singing vocal jazz, you're singing really tight chords.
Yeah.
And jazz chords always have a minor second or a major second in there. And it causes that rub, makes on the vibraphone, it makes everything shimmer, and you bury that in the voicing. So to be a vocal jazz singer, man, is like really hard.
For sure, yeah, you have to have perfect pitch, like 100%. It's to be able to sing those dissonant of chords would be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. They have my undying respect. So that's why I played along. I just loved hearing those cool harmonies.
Absolutely.
Well, Sandy, it's amazing. No, that's great. It's amazing to look at. I mean, how you from where you came from, you ended up in Chadron. Because talking before with Andy a little bit about this, I never would have guessed that somebody that because you've been to the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh, California State University at Fresno. You were a faculty associate at Arizona State University, Glendale Community College, and then you ended up in Chadron for the last, you said, 20 years of your career. What brought you to Nebraska, of all places?
Oh, jobs, man. You go where the gigs are.
Okay.
Right. So
that's the most rock and roll thing I've heard.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, yeah. How did I get there? Bad tenure decisions. I lost a tenure decision. I went, which is so that was University of Wisconsin, which was kind of convoluted. I went there first for without a doctorate, and the job was 5 years with no possibility of renewal. It's like one of those jobs.
Oh, yep.
So that job. So you take those jobs. So I went to Comedy Place, right? Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Froze my tuchus off, as we say in the business. And man, it was so 5 years. I was gone like all the other percussion teachers, right? So I went off and I played in Atlantic City. I had a student from Fresno who was like a big star at Harrah's in Atlantic City. And that's a whole nother story. So he gave me a gig. I went and played with him, and he was surrounded by adulated fans and white tails, white piano, and he did big Liberace kind of things. People loved him. They hated the hit music right after us. So yeah. After that, I didn't get any college gigs. So I went and got a doctorate. So that's what brought me to Arizona. And in Arizona, once they found out I could teach big classes, I teach jazz rock, because I started out teaching jazz rock in 1977. It's kind of jazz history, rock history class. So at ASU, man, those classes were like 500 strong. There were 500. So I had two classes of 500 people each, and I had my own teaching assistant.
That's about like our Theory 1 class in Shadron, wasn't it?
Yeah,
about 500 or so.
Yeah. So it was that was an interesting time, but that's where I learned that operating a school is just like operating a bar. You have to have people coming in buying drinks or paying admission. You have to have people enrolling in classes. So it turns out it took about 17 people to create one FTE, which means like 17 people, the course pays for itself, right? So string quartets, they lose money. Percussion ensembles, they lose money. All the small groups lose money. But then they have these big classes, general studies classes that do 500, imagine 500 students pays for a lot of string quartets.
For sure.
And stuff like that. So at Shadron, at Shadron, they had the regular music history class in general studies. And so you don't want to compete for those dollars, with your own department. So, but the newest thing, was the global studies and the whole idea of, so that was, as soon as you looked at global studies or ethnic studies or anything, bingo, we get the beginnings of rock and roll and jazz. We get to talk about African musical characteristics. So I called the class African-American popular music history. It was 1619 to 1970, I think.
Yeah, wow.
The first African got here in 1619. That's a year before the Pilgrims.
Right.
So our musics have been malleable ever since. I'm making one of these signs, malleable. It's like missing DNA. Europe developed harmony. And to do that, Europe had to change God's harmonic system to create the piano. So we could play in all these different keys,
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we don't tune to just intonation anymore, because, when you started going to weird keys, the intonation got really, really funky fast. So we created the piano, so Europeans created that, but Africans developed different kinds of things like improvisation and the use of drums, and xylophones and things like that. So, European needed some energy and some syncopation mostly, but Europeans cut music away from the dance, right?
Right.
So like we look down on dance music from the academy, the lofty academy. Dance music is looked at as something inferior. So what the fusion of Europe and Africa here in America, that just kind of reconnected music with the dance. So anyhow, so that way I could teach those kinds of classes at Shadron without competing. So we called it African American popular music.
And that was like a general studies class, wasn't it?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
like I told all my buddies like in college that weren't music majors, I was like, you just take this class, like you won't regret it. It's awesome.
So obviously, Sandy, I can hear the passion that you have for this when you talk about it. You grew up around Chicago. Is that where you're originally from?
No, I'm a Jersey boy.
A Jersey, okay.
I did grow up around Chicago. Yeah. And my aunt reminds me of when in the bassinet when she played me the music from this Broadway show, Song of Norway. Mm-hmm. That had a thing called Freddie and His Fiddle, and my eyes danced in the crib, right? And my grandmother said, "Turn that off. You'll hurt his eyes." I thought, man, I want to have that in the shirt, man. Turn that music off. It'll hurt his eyes.
That's awesome.
So when you started to grow up, and obviously you had musical influence around you all the time. And
actually, no, my parents, I had no music.
Really? Boy, the impression there that just doesn't seem like you didn't grow up with it.
Yeah, it's unlike my wife grew up in a family where both her parents were music majors, know? So, but what that gave her was parental pressure to do this.
Sure.
And for me to go be a music major was my father did not want me to be a music major. But my aunt was a professional musician, and she played marimba. And in fact, I just got a picture. I was in contact with her daughter. Picture of her playing two marimbas at once, and she's got this big taffeta gown on, and the top has like a musical notes all over it and stuff. I thought, wow, man, it's like Hank Williams. But she was in Hartford, so we visited her, and She threw a little marimba in the car, so we went. We had moved to Illinois by then, so I'm from Jersey, moved to Illinois. So I started out playing, marimba. I didn't play drums first. I wasn't part of the early music education system. So I had a private teacher. I talked my way into my high school band, because I could read mallet parts, and that took the load off all the other drummers. And I gradually, learned how to play drums. I got my drum set the day the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And
that's awesome.
I started past my aunt. I just have to throw this my rant and about being a musician, right? So I started the sophomore year summer, my freshman year summer. So like I'm just a little kid. They shipped me off to Hartford to study with my aunt. So what my aunt does is teach me, play marimba and stuff and all lots of technical things. But she took me on gigs, and she gave me a fake book, and it's the old number one fake book. I got to show you this. I guess I don't got to show you this.
I've got one sitting in my garage as well. Probably.
It's got do you? It's got like 3 songs on a page.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I don't got one of the like that. Mine's a little bigger.
Yeah. That was years ago, man. So she played vibes. She was 8 months pregnant. She's playing vibes, and there was an accordion player, a Cordovox, electric accordion, doing organ-like sounds, and the bass player and a drummer. And then she brought her other marimba along with me, had her name in rhinestones on the front, Florence Schaefer. And she said, here, when it's your turn to solo, play the melody. When you get to a long note, run the chord. Okay, go. So I was on stage, that summer, playing weddings, playing at mental institutions. She just took me on gigs. And it was amazing. But what that did is, all of a sudden I'm a performer and I'm in high school, and I'm different than all the other high school kids because they're audience and I'm on stage. So that I didn't realize it then. And then I came back, then we're in the market for a drum set. The Beatles are on Ed Sullivan's show the day I buy this drum set. And I start playing in rock bands, and I become, local rock star. In the North Shore of Chicago, they had teenage nightclubs.
Oh, okay.
So you rented a couple of wise guys rent a union hall and pay a band and charge kids at the door and sell them Cokes, So each town on the North Shore had one of these things on the weekend. So I was playing for the same money when I was in high school that, I'm playing for now.
So you were, as a teenager, you're getting that feel on stage, that kind of rock star feel that was probably, all around you then. It had to be exciting. It had to be exhilarating. So being a rock star or being a professor, how did it go from that to what you ended up being?
Oh, well, you love too many different kinds of music, so you want to put yourself in a situation where you aren't typecast, because in all of the arts, people get typecast, basically, as a rock performer. I mean, it's what made the Beatles different, right? Like rock bands then, your second album, holy shit, you just tried to do more of the same, only it wasn't as good. You didn't want to lose your audience by educating them, and the Beatles just kind of educated the audience. Just Miles Davis did the same thing. People waited for the new things to come out, man. All of those things that oldies bands play, I played while they were on the charts, and we didn't call them cover bands because people didn't do originals. That originals didn't come along to singer-songwriters,
right.
Be somebody in their guitar and coffee houses, and people started, writing their own material.
Well, that's a fascinating answer to go into the education field of music because of wanting to study it all, to try to be a part of it all. I love that answer.
Yeah, when I was in college, I thought, I thought a studio musician would be good because you come in every day and play different stuff. I knew about that job, and it was funny. It's the '60s. I probably could have done that, but after I got out of college, it was the war, right?
Right.
So the Vietnam War. So I'm a Vietnam War era veteran. I was the first year of the lottery. Right.
Oh, wow.
So in a lottery, you're getting drafted. Right. So I'm a senior. I'm getting out of school, instantly going to have to get drafted. So, my percussion teacher met a guy at Frank's Drum Shop who told him all about the NORAD band. And it doesn't exist anymore. So there are openings in the NORAD band. And it was based in Colorado Springs. NORAD is that. They track Santa Claus every year. They track Santa, the big thing in the mountain.
Yes.
And they have radar sites all along the northern part. So a guy in 1959 dreamed up, let's have a really professional show busy band. And so he created this NORAD band. It was Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Canadian Forces. Right. So there are all these people there. And it turned out, we auditioned the day of the Kent State Massacre. Actually,
wow.
We were talking about tied to we were driving across the country to audition at the NORAD band when we heard about the reports coming in that the students had killed a bunch of National Guard people, and then gradually it changed during the course of our drive to, we killed those students, but they threw rocks at us.
Right.
So, so we kind of lived under shadow. He had a high draft number. I was number 60. So he ended up going to University of North Texas, which is a hotshot jazz school. And I went into the NORAD band, and there was an Air Force slot. So I was in there for 4 years. But after the war, they threw me out early. So it was like 3 years, 7 months, and 1 day. But it was like being in college band. Everybody had degrees, The officers were the conductors. They, we had the same degrees as they had. So there's this mutual respect. Mm-hmm. It's not an officer enlisted man relationship. It's conductor musician. And we traveled 10 days to 2 weeks every month. And every month we do a different NORAD region. It was like in the winter, we like go to San Diego and Phoenix and Albuquerque and Florida, right? That's
smart.
In the summertime,
Yeah.
we go up to Canada. We do Canada in the summer. It was
Yeah, that's wild.
because of the war. I was busy hating it.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
so and nowadays I tout it. It's the only place where you can play. Like if you're a musician, you can play stuff like you played in college. You play in band, you have a jazz band, you have a rock band. You know, you have to march. The exact same stuff that you did in college, you can do that in the military. Plus, you have medical benefits and retirement. Oh, and the gig never falls through.
Right.
And the club manager never says, "Hey guys, I'm not paying you tonight."
There's not any backwards promoters or anything like that.
Yeah. So like, what part of that didn't I like? You know,
Right.
plus you get to wear blue. You know,
It's your color.
Well, man, you said something earlier that like I wish somebody had told me 20 years ago when you're talking about your aunt telling you to take a solo when she says, just play the melody and then when you get to a long note, just outline the chord. I wish somebody would have told me that like 25 years ago. Like it would have made improvising so much easier.
Well, you know, guitar players. Did you only play guitar?
I play guitar. I played upright and string bass and the symphony and stuff like that. But I was primarily I was a piano player before I started playing guitar.
Okay. So then you make that translation. I'm guitar like shapes, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
You knew what you were doing.
Kind of. I mean, even when I started,
Well,
I
you
was like,
knew those notes. You put your hands on those notes, and
you know,
knew
one of them's going to be right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the piano players. You know, they all have a big advantage because everything's laid out in a linear fashion.
Sure.
You know, and we get to see the 2 black notes and the 3 black notes. You know,
Yep.
and that's how we divide our octaves in guitar because of the way guitar is. You can learn reading tabs, you know, and most guitar players learn that way. So you relate to music that way. And then you relate to music with pentatonic scales a lot, right? Everything's kind of pentatonic scales. And we're talking about this with other old jazz musicians. What you don't have is the 3rd and 7ths usually in that
Right.
same string of notes. And those 3rd and 7ths, that's how harmonies move together. I call it gasoline. You know, you have that tritone. You know, and
I remember you describing them as like the gender. Yeah, guitar players play like just power chords, and they don't add any thirds. And you're like, you're like, this is a male chord and a female chord. But if you just do the 1-5 and an octave, it's just like a genderless chord. You don't really know what it is that what it's relating back to.
It's with all the distortion, it creates a really dense, electronic musical spectrum.
Yeah.
The fifths line up. The interesting thing is, fifths are supposed to be perfect. I mentioned about changing God's tuning system.
Right.
Tuners do not tune perfect fifths.
No.
Old guys, before computers, right? Old guys tuned it so there were a beat and a half per second on the fifths. Right, so you start out. There are no perfect fifths, on piano.
Right.
So,
all right, Sandy. This leads to a question I've always wanted to ask somebody that's got a lot of knowledge. Okay, and you sound like you sound like you do.
We can fill up airspace.
Well, I work in a business with a lot of guys. We have a lot of ego, but I don't know if we have a lot of knowledge. A lot of times, can you take someone who can't sing, who has no rhythm, who's not musically inclined in almost any sense, but has a desire? Can you teach that to someone?
Oh, yeah, you can teach that to people, but music is one of those things where it takes the hours in the practice room. So we have taken students who had like rhythmic challenges and things, and beaten them savagely around, with education, and you can improve those things. So it's hard to know if somebody doesn't have the it's hard to know at what point you cannot have the ability. And I've had some handicapped students, and you and I hate to use that word, ably,
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's possible for people who don't have control of their hands, to make music now because things are compiled, so recordings are compiled. And so, however, that makes it impossible for somebody who usually doesn't play an instrument to go to college and be a music major. So usually people have some background. Mm-hmm. And if you accept guitar players, they didn't used to accept guitar players,
And they still don't really before college. There's really not, it's still not a very common thing for, high schools or anything like that to have any kind of formal guitar teaching. And what I was kind of saying before is like my piano education was all Suzuki. So that was all through like Suzuki ear training lessons. So I still went to college barely being able to read, and had to force my way through that.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting to know. I mean, because it always feels like music for people that get into it and make it their life. There's something internally. There's already something internally for the vast majority of these people.
Oh, why would you accept so little money for so much training?
There you go. Well, all right, Sandy. Kind of to the point of this whole podcast that we do. Can you? And I know you've kind of hit on it just a little bit, but can you think back to that one moment, or that one song, or that one concert you saw that you thought, you know what? Yes. And it sounds to me like the answer is almost going to be your aunt.
Oh yeah, probably that. And then being playing in this group called the London Assembly. I have a photograph. In the '60s you had to acknowledge the British invasion. So my rock star group was the London Assembly, and I started saving broken drumsticks. Because girls asked for broken drumsticks.
I know, yeah, that's the thing.
Does it always come down to the girls, Sandy? It seems like it does in music. He stuttered out. Yeah, that's certainly an attractive part of it. But the drummer back then had more to pack up, so you never really got the girls. It was always the lead singer. But now, as electronics, as they invented PA systems, for God's sakes, I mean, I was doing this before the Shure Vocal Master. That was like the first PA system that was like anything. Remember those pictures of the Beatles playing in Atlanta? It's like,
and they're
gonna hear that,
right? And they're using like the PAs, like the stadium's PA, like the in-house PA, not like a front. It's crazy,
right? Oh yeah,
and that's why they became a studio band, because they're like, what's the point? Like nobody can even hear it. We can't hear ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, over the screaming. Yeah, and those early. It's so funny to watch the Ed Sullivan things, because they've been really filtered beautifully. Maybe they've put in some other tracks, but when you as a viewer at home, it really was wall to wall screaming.
Wow,
crazy.
It really was wall to wall screaming. Crazy stuff.
That's awesome.
Well, Sandy, it's been this has been a great conversation. I've learned stuff, and I've never taken a music class ever. But it's like I said, I can obviously hear that this is something that you loved, and I know you're retired right now. Have you ever? Do you have any desire to continue to teach, or do you still kind of teach in your own way a little bit?
Oh yeah. No, I'm first of all, I run a jam session, jazz jam session. Some guys moved from Denver. Some jazz musicians moved from Denver, some 30 something kids, they're in their 30s, tired of fighting the battle. They moved here to open up a brewery.
Wow.
So they had a great players, man. She's a great singer. So they opened this brewery, and so we've been friends. So we started, they wanted to have music. They paid ASCAP and BMI right away.
Sure.
And had music. So we do first and third Sunday jam sessions. And then the other days we're rounding out with a jazz vocalist. So I've been pretty much playing every Sunday. You
That's
know,
awesome.
and it's great. It's right on Siletz Bay, so we're on we're on the West Coast, and this brewery is in part of an old resort called Salishan, and it's had a little marketplace. So they've got a nice patio deck, and they put up they have high winds there. That's got now the third tent's really big and sturdy. So when it gets in the wintertime, we moved indoors, but all throughout the summer we're playing out there, and I work with an organization called Music is Instrumental. It was started by an administrator who retired here, who knows how important music is. So they filled out grants, got big grant to return music to the high school. The high school was able to add faculty positions and buy like $370,000 worth of instruments.
Wonderful.
So, so before COVID, I was going in there, and I'm still going in. We're having a spike here right now.
Right.
So I'm sitting out for another week or two. But yeah, I go in and work with, I've been working with the 8th and 9th grade bands, and so I'm still, doing some learning material for those cats and getting ready to start a marimba band with them.
That's awesome. You never really retire as a musician.
Oh, no. You see, I found my career is you find a way to finance your playing of music. So it's nice the school system, thinks music's important.
Good.
So, I had the tax players, pay me to teach music, and it enabled me to spread stuff around. And especially like at Shadron, with those bands going and playing in bars. So we got people up on stage and learning how to play a gig.
Yep, exactly.
Learning how to,
awesome.
Learning how, learning how it's your turn to solo, and people learn what they're doing.
Well,
so
Sandy,
we had great fun.
This is thank you so much for taking this time. It was very nice to meet you, and Andy obviously speaks very highly of you. So
thank you.
Yeah,
of course.
this was a very fun conversation, and thanks for taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, we'll
see you again sometime.
Yeah, we'll do it again if I'm ever up in that area again. I'll have to come crash a jam sesh.
Absolutely, baby. We have a place to stay.
All right. Appreciate
Take care, guys.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Andy. Appreciate it.
You
Good to see
bet.
you.